Welcome to our podcast. Let's Make History Together is dedicated to Springfield, Ohio. We are a coalition of community members who are actively shaping a new, bold vision for our city. We are doing so through an initiative called Springfield 2051.
Welcome to our Springfield 2051 podcast series. My name is Kevin Rose. I'm the historian with the Turner Foundation right here in Springfield, and I'm also a steering committee member with Springfield 2051. I'm joined here today by David Beurle with Future IQ, helping us with the Springfield 2051 project. Thank you, David. And also Horton Hobbs, the VP of Economic Development at the Greater Springfield Partnership. Thank you, Horton. So this project, where we're at right now, is we have identified 7 strategic pillars that are really our building blocks forward on creating a roadmap for our community. And today we're here to talk about just one of those pillars, but obviously a really important pillar, stimulating strategic economic development. So to get us going, Horton, I'll start with you. This obviously has been identified after numerous listening sessions and focus groups and community surveys. I mean, it's no surprise to us, right? You've been working in this for 25 years in this community, or working in similar areas for a long time. What is our current trajectory in economic development here in Springfield and in the greater Springfield region?
Yeah, Kevin, that's a great question. It's a hard question to answer, but I would tell you we have finally stabilized. For decades-long decline has been highlighted and noted in multiple occasions. We finally, once we started to realize we have to kind of diversify our economy, our economic base, and we started to develop strategies around that, we started to gain some incremental wins. And as we did that, we started to see our economy stabilize. I mean, because of the way our community is structured, the economics of our community, we don't really enjoy the highest highs of the economic, the grander economic, national landscape, and we also don't see the lowest of lows. We're kind of right in the middle, and that has served us extraordinarily well, really, over the last 15 to 20 years. As a result, because we've been able to have some wins as a community, some larger employers come in, we're starting to backfill some of those positions that we had lost, candidly, over a generation or so. And so today, I would tell you, we have essentially replaced the jobs that we lost over the last 20 years. And now we're really poised for significant growth. And it's a growth, I think, that's going to be across multiple industry sectors. We as an organization don't focus on just one, but we also don't focus on all of the economic drivers of our community. It's an ecosystem, right? So this process, the pillars, all of the 7 pillars or 6 pillars, whatever we end up with at the end of the day, they all play a role in defining our economic trajectory. But today, if I were to sum it up, I would say we're stable and growing.
Nice. And actually, I wasn't even planning on this question, but you were just talking about that larger ecosystem. One of the things I've really appreciated about your work at the partnership is that you have focused on that larger, right? Studies show that if people are going to locate a business there, if they're going to move something there, it's a place they would want to live. It doesn't mean they're going to live here, that they're going to move their residence, but it's a place they want to live because they know their executives are going to be here. All employees at all levels of their organization are going to be in this community. And then also that people often are not thinking about places they've not visited before, not heard about before. And you guys have been focused a lot in that, and I applaud you for that. And obviously, I work in some of those areas that have benefited from your investment and the work that you guys have done. But can you talk some about a little bit more just about the ecosystem that we've created here as a community?
Yeah, it's really important. And I would tell you the close-knit nature of our ecosystem was probably far more prevalent 25 years ago than it is today. And that is largely due to macroeconomic conditions. So as you mentioned, people really do gravitate now to where they want to live before they really decide where they want to work. You go back to Bill Gates, back when he built Microsoft's headquarters in Washington State. He was going to build a headquarters, or did build it, outside of the Silicon Valley. And somebody could fact check me the date, but this is a long time ago, 40 plus years ago. And when asked, why did you locate your facility there in Redlands? And they said, well, because I wanted to find a place where I knew my people would want to live so that I could find the workforce I would need to grow my vision. That's not how economic development used to be. It used to be you build it and they will come. It was about land and incentives, and those things are still important, but that was the major driver. What could a community really do that? So over time, that's changed. And the quality of life, as we've had economic change and we've had population change, sense of place matters more today than it ever has before in this game. And so Springfield, which is a cultural hub, and it has been since we were founded, it relies on having those amenities that are attractive to both families and executives. But where the big change has occurred, and where I think we can jump the curve, is that if you go back 25 years ago, most of our larger employers in the community were family owned or had a nexus here in Clark County. Mm-hmm. I would say most of those don't exist today, or they've changed through mergers and acquisitions. But what happens when that happens? When your C-suite, your executives, and your middle managers and upper managers live in the community they work in, they are more engaged in the community through their philanthropic efforts, through their shopping and where they live. And as that changes and executive leadership lives somewhere else and commutes in every day, you tend to lose that connectedness to the community. Where we have been very strong is while we've experienced that, because we're a big town or a big, large town, however you want to look at that, we've had the ecosystem in place from an arts and culture perspective, from social services, and community-based, strong neighborhoods. Those have remained very resilient during this time. We can argue some have been more successful than others. Other parts of the community have been more successful than others. But because of our history and the way we were created and have been formed, that sense of community has existed here. And I think it's been a real strength of ours. Over the last 20 years, there's been real intentionality about strengthening that. And it's difficult, right? We have a lot of nonprofits. We have a lot of arts organizations in the community. They require all doing very important things, but they all require resources. And as resources have diminished, there's a requirement, really. Maybe it's unwritten many times that collaboration has to happen at a level we've never seen before in order to sustain that. So when we sell our community, and I hate using the word sell, but when we're talking about Springfield and Clark County to the rest of the world and to a corporate executive, certainly we talk about all those logistical strengths and the water that we have here and the resources. But what we really talk about a lot is the connectedness of this community. The deep traditional neighborhoods and how tied they are, the cultural amenities that we have. We're a world-class city. We are. And we got to start talking about it that way. And those things are differentiators for us. Now that quality of life is such an important driver for people's choice to live.
Yeah.
Talent wins the game.
Yeah, Kevin, if I could, I'd love to just sort of probe this with Horton, because I think what you said was fascinating, and I was very interested in this notion that you've basically recovered 20 years of loss, right? Mm-hmm. One of the things we've heard a lot in the listening sessions and through the engagement in this project is people are really curious or interested in how they see the economy evolving here. And I guess if there were a couple of themes that come out that I'd love to get your thoughts on, right? So one is that people want to think about or are thinking about, if we have economic growth, how do we make sure that benefit distributes to the community and across the community, right? Not just localized in some areas, right? Because, you've got this social fabric layer, which you just hit on, right? Which is really important. The other part that I would love to get your reaction on is that I've heard people talk a lot about looking forward. Their interest in, is Springfield an opportunity for innovation and being a location for innovation, leveraging off that sort of creative space and so on, and perhaps look with envy towards Columbus and some of the technology sort of concentrations there, or Dayton and some of the sort of sophisticated defense missions and so on. And I know that you've been very close to some opportunities here around sort of advanced aviation and so on. What do you see as if we've gone through this period and it's now stabilised, what do you see the next 5 or 10 years? Yeah. What type of jobs are going to be here? What type of businesses have you got your eye on that you think could be a fit for either existing Springfield or the Springfield that's emerging?
Yeah, great question, and it's one our team wrestles with all the time, candidly. If I think about our community's history, it is innovation. Our founding was based on an innovative spirit. In fact, all those entrepreneurs heading west to seek prosperity stopped here for 10 years. And so all of that innovation started here, and it kept growing into the 1900s. I think somewhere along the way we kind of got complacent. We lost our way a little bit. We devalued our role in innovation, but I don't think it's ever gone away. But what I do think is we've not taken advantage of our location and access to large metropolitan areas where innovation just seems second nature because of large research institutions like Ohio State or things going on at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. And so when we weren't able to innovate on our own, I think we stopped looking for ways to innovate by pulling in resources from around us. I think that's changed. In fact, I know it's changed. And you referenced one. Advanced air mobility is one of those places. Because what's for certain in this community is we know how to build things, and we also know how to move things. And those two pieces of our workforce and our economic base, I don't see them ever going away. We will always be a manufacturing hub. We will always be a logistics center. But how can you leverage those two things to get into a space that's unique enough to be different? Advanced air mobility is a great one of those. So for us, we have airspace. We have one of only a few places in the country, in the world really, that has an integrated airspace with things that have people flying in them and things that don't have people flying in them. And that's very fascinating from a research perspective, from a talent perspective. But as that technology proves out, the manufacturing opportunities to support that industry will continue to grow. And because we have the airspace and because we have a manufacturing ecosystem here, from regular manufacturing to supply chain, we have a very strong opportunity there. For some of the things you've already mentioned, and certainly what's come out of a lot of these listening sessions, is we have abundant natural resources that are well preserved, well protected, but also, when I think of water, they're not going to go anywhere, knock on wood, because of the very nature in which it was created, right? It's an aquifer and the way it drains. So that is an asset that we will continue to try to leverage. And one of the areas where we can see a tremendous opportunity is in the bio world, bio research, I call it BioX, because I don't know if that's biopharmaceuticals, I don't know if it's bio research, I don't know if it's biotechnology. But why am I so bullish about that? Because we have the feedstock. We have the logistical strength to get the product to our community to create a new product in a bio space. We have the inputs of natural resources, water predominantly, and it's affordable and it's clean. And we have wastewater and sewer capacity in our community that most communities in the Midwest do not have in terms of the ability to process and discharge and do it right. But we also have a thing called Global Impact STEM Academy. And certainly what I love about Giza, and full disclosure, I am on the board of Giza, and I'm not picking a favorite school district because I love all of our school districts, every single one of them. They're all very important to our education and talent ecosystem, and candidly, we all work very, very well together. But what Giza is doing is different. It's different because it's focused specifically in ag, natural resources, bioscience, the very area where our founding occurred. Agriculture has been our base. There's tremendous opportunity there as we advance forward. And why that matters so much is employers that are looking to either locate or exist here today and want to grow, talent is everything. Where will we find the talent to grow? So when we think about future opportunities, we can't just think about land sites, the feedstock, if you will, all of the traditional site selection things. We have to think about people. And we have really tried to understand our workforce in ways that most communities don't. This space around Giza and what they're doing with real world experiences, and now many of our high schools are picking up that same sort of education model, that is something that translates very simply into a pipeline of talent for these entities. But it can't be all entities, right? So we have to find niches. And that's where I think the bio fits in very, very well, because it builds off of our heritage. We have a pipeline and programming. But what's great about here is we have access to 20 colleges and universities within a 50-minute drive of where we're sitting right now in downtown Springfield. We have Wittenberg and Clark State right here, but you have Ohio State literally 42 minutes away. So it's about leveraging those. The final one that I would say, so I think there are three. The final one is in semiconductors. And I know that sounds so broad, but we're seeing a tremendous proliferation in data and technology. Data centers are a whole nother piece of that puzzle. But I do believe because of that proximity between the juggernaut we have in Columbus with the Intel and all of the research firms there, and then Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, almost equidistant to our southwest, we sit right in the middle. And I think, I believe, and I guess I say I know, that is our strength, because you can choose to live in a community like Springfield and have the quality of life and the cost of living to live here and work in those markets. But you also have the ability to live here, go work there if you need to, and come back. But if we attract, as we are planning and as we are seeing happen, you get best of both worlds. You have a great housing stock that's being built today. You have a cost of living and a quality of life here that I would put up with anybody. And now you have the economic base and the jobs here. People don't have to leave. And that starts to grow the ecosystem. You know, when we think about economic development, we do start talking about neighborhoods and we start talking about retail, and those are very important pieces of the conversation. But, you know, there's a hierarchy to impact of economic development. And when you have what are called economic-based jobs grown in your community, where they're exporting a product, if you will, out of our community, that's when you're bringing new resources in. Retail, the service economies, they recycle revenue and economy within the community they're in. So the only way to grow that pie is to grow that economic base. And so our strategies have been predominantly focused in those areas. And I would tell you it was a shotgun approach for many years. We just took what we could get, and a lot of times there wasn't a lot of opportunity. Today, now we're in a position where we're able to pick and choose a little bit more because the opportunities are really prevalent, because we have positioned ourselves well. If we start to win like we have over the last decade with growth and job investment, and we start to see higher wage paying companies enter our market, we will now start to see that overall stabilization and growth of our economy once again. And that will strengthen our neighborhoods, and it will strengthen our retail and service corridors that serve our residential base here in the community. So it is very much an ecosystem. And as you pull one lever, you've got to be balancing the other ones as well. David, you could tell I have long answers to very short questions.
No, it's beautiful. And I'll point out, as people could see if they're watching this, that I have a computer and I have questions prepared, and you've basically run through all of them quite beautifully. So David,
I didn't know what they were.
It's fantastic. I love it.
So I think it's really exciting what you're saying, because, you know, to sort of summarize it, it's like you've sort of rebuilt or recovered the manufacturing, transportation, logistics base, right? So that's been restored. There are these three areas that have got very promising potential, which I think are really interesting because they diversify your economy, because they overlap, but they're not in the same swim lane. And you're talking about biosciences and that potential, right? Obviously, you've got enormous potential there. The advanced aviation, like a really interesting and quite different one. And then, of course, tapping into the semiconductor, you know, sort of markets is really probably spin-offs from Columbus and so on, right? One of the things we've heard in the community engagement, though, is as well as, right? So that sounds fascinating, right? One of the things that I think, and you touched on it right towards the end there, is that people are also excited about the potential for building more economic activity around what you call the creative or the arts and culture sort of component, right? And you're right, that to a degree recycles, the retail component recycles, but I think people are also seeing Springfield having potential to be a destination in its own right, and having some of that tourism overlay or destination economy where people are here for events and festivals. And we were talking earlier about actually the downtown, how quite unique some of the offerings are there in terms of the restaurants. They're not the usual restaurants. And there is this sweet spot in there, I think, of a lot of smaller, locally owned businesses that are in the food, entertainment, sort of service provision type sectors, right? That adds a whole nother flavour and layer. And I think that also provides pathways for people to directly set up their own business. And I've been to a number of those establishments, right? And really, you talk to those people, and they're like people who are here and they saw an opportunity and they, opened up a facility. It's like real sort of local grown talent. And I think if what I hear you're talking about, Horton, is if you can get that bigger set of economic drivers firing and get that right, that has all these spin-offs that really create the environment for more of those local businesses. And once you sort of see that whole picture, then you've got a really balanced and resilient and dynamic economy.
That's right.
And you can see in that how that can distribute opportunity for all sorts of people, because there's all these different pathways and swim lanes.
It's interesting. We're seeing it happen. You mentioned how long I've been doing this. I mean, I remember working down in Center City, 20 plus years ago, and what you see downtown was visioned 20 years ago, and now you're seeing it happen. It's painful to watch how much time goes by to make those things happen, but you're starting to see the tide turn, and here's how. So we went, 60 years without a large-scale residential development in our community, massive housing development. And now we're seeing that happen. Well, we weren't seeing it happen because we weren't seeing jobs grow and come back. And jobs, not just jobs, but jobs of a livable wage. And so that created all kinds of pressure for us as we lost Target. If there's one retailer that needs to come back to Springfield, it's Target.
We'll get them.
But the reason I can't pretend to tell you why we lost Target. There are lots of reasons, I'm sure, for that from their perspective. But part of it is we just weren't building new rooftops in our community. The market, we lost all of our home builders, or the majority of them that were building the homes of scale here. They either retired, they moved on, they went to different markets, or the economy was tanking at a rate too fast. And so that is changing. And because it's changing, there's an energy, there's a momentum that's being felt. Well, as that momentum was starting to tick up and we started to see investment in our downtown from a retail perspective, then we started to see some housing, then we started to see restaurants. They were hedging their bets. If I were to had a crystal ball and could see back to what they were thinking, wow, we're on the upturn and oh my goodness, I'm going to put my restaurant downtown because it's a perfect time. Well, then you have a housing market that kind of blew up a little bit. You had high interest rates, construction costs went through the roof. These are recent anomalies, and they started to stunt some of the pace of the redevelopment. And so now they're out on an island in downtown. And so they have great concepts, incredible food, great environments, very cool scene, but they need people. And so my plea to anyone listening to this is stop and think before you go to Bechtel to eat, which I do at times, go there with my family. Think about those downtown businesses and those independent, locally owned restaurants as well. We need more and more to support those. Because for the next 12 months or so, they need that foot traffic. Because after the next 12 months, we're going to have 300-400 new housing units in our downtown. And that energy will help to really build that scene. So we are seeing investment come back in. We're seeing it in disparate parts of the community, not all in one area. It is happening throughout. We're a lot of infill. But we also are seeing some big nodes of redevelopment. And while it's a lot, it seems like a lot, it's not enough. It has to continue. And as that pace continues, which I believe it will, we will start to see that then balance out the opportunities and make what may be hard economic times for some of our smaller independently owned operations. Over time, I think that balances out as our demographic changes. We're also getting much more attuned at attracting people into the community from, we're telling our story. And we're inviting people to live in our community again. 56% of our people live in Clark County, in Springfield, and they drive out to jobs and opportunities somewhere else. That's 32,000 people make that decision every day. 23,000 actually make the other decision, come here. There's 9,000 people, though, that we just need to kind of figure out where those opportunities are. Maybe it is as an entrepreneur opening up their own business and staying here, or it's going to work at a place they just didn't think was there for them in our community. So, yeah, the momentum is definitely building. I've always contended, it's interesting to me, if Dayton's past and therefore Springfield's past is often defined by being this entrepreneurial hotspot. And actually, the Dayton region is one of the highest rated entrepreneurial centers in the country. But it's really interesting because entrepreneurialism to me is juxtaposed to Midwest values. And hear me out on that. Generally, when you think about entrepreneurs, and so think about mom and pop, small business owners, restaurateurs, those kinds of things. 3 out of 5 or 1 out of 5 make it. The majority fail. And failure in entrepreneurialism is very much a coastal thing. It's an east-west, it's a West Coast mentality. And people are good with that. But in the Midwest, we don't fail well at all. And in our community, a blue-collar town and its roots, we don't fail well. So the ecosystem for entrepreneurial development needs to be strengthened and become more robust. And that's services, that's funding, but it's a chicken or an egg, right? You have to have the resources to be able to do that in a way that provides the runway for some of these entrepreneurs to take the kind of risk that's mitigated rather than just taking all the risk. We've gotten more sophisticated over the last 5-6 years with helping mitigate some of the risk for downtown, specifically through Spring Forward and some other initiatives. We're getting better at that throughout the community. But we have to be very intentional about what we want as a community and what we need to be able to be successful. And it's one thing to win a project or to get a restaurant open. It's about how do you sustain that as a community, because everybody sees, they read the win, but everybody remembers the loss. And the worst thing we can do for our momentum is to have something be attracted here and then not be successful. So to be very, very careful about how we do that. And that extends throughout the economy at the smallest level to the biggest.
It's interesting that you say that, because I think in my world of history, arts and culture, those areas, when we focus on people, individuals, William Whiteley, right? One of the great inventors, we focus on their successes, obviously, but we don't focus on their failures. And a lot of these people had a lot of pretty big failures that either led them to that, or sometimes that happened after that success, right? That things that happened. Or if we do talk about failures, we talk about major failures, right? The closing of Kroll Collier, the complete decimation of industry, and we get on those topics. But maybe we need to do a better job of also focusing some on these hiccups, we'll call them, things that people tried along the ways that didn't quite work out. Because you're right, they are a big part of what leads to their ultimate success.
It's how our community was founded. Yeah, all those failures, they never left. They kept innovating.
So I have a question, right? And Kevin, to you as well as to Horton. So I'll take over the podcast here. Right?
Please.
I was sort of tracking in my mind the numbers of new rooftops, because you were talking about Horton, that a key part of the trigger was that you had no new rooftops for 60 years, right? Well, now you've got not only the 300 units going in downtown, but you've also got those housing developments on the east side.
We have over 3,000 housing units in various stages of development throughout the county.
Yeah. And so my question is, do you have much information on who's going into those? Are they new people coming into the community? And if that's the case, then I think that's worth thinking about, because how do you then connect those people? Right. Because they're the people who are going to be trying the new experience. They're going to be excited about being here. They're probably coming in with either a revenue stream from a job or something. Any insights or thoughts on that?
Yeah, I'll take it first, and you want to jump in? It's largely anecdotal. It's interesting. You would think that would be an easy one from real estate information, those kinds of, but a lot of that information is just not public. But what I can tell you pretty certainly is much of the new housing that's being purchased on the east side of Springfield, for instance, Melody Parks, Bridgewater, most of those are coming from outside of the market. There's some that are moving within the market, which you would expect, but the majority, more than 50%, are coming from predominantly the Columbus market. And that is an incredible trend. What's interesting about that, though, is that creates upward mobility, though, too. If somebody within our community moves from a rental in a part of town to one of the newer units, that's not a loss. Because what that does is it provides that strata of housing opportunity that we did not have to have families anchor themselves here multi-generationally into the community. So we're also seeing rentals be turned into owner-occupied or movement out of rental into owner-occupied within the community. But I think the verdict is still out of whether that trend of folks coming in will continue, but I don't see that changing at all. And we are working on some marketing things, whether it's new resident kits, those kinds of things, to kind of anchor those people back into the community.
So yeah, with some of the work we were doing at the Turner Foundation, we were looking at, can this succeed, right? And not 90 units. Yeah. Can 90 units plus 150 plus 200 units survive in this ecosystem? And we brought in a psychodemographic firm that really focuses on the deeper desires that people have as they're looking for housing. And I don't remember all of the details of the report of this. It was several years ago. But what I do remember is that the consultant said that there was not a city in America that he was more excited about. Now, he wasn't working in every city in America, but that Springfield had a lot of just pent-up demand for this. And what he found is that people were leaving this market because we didn't have the housing opportunity. Right. Specifically, we'll call it high-rise, 4, 5-story, 7-story, 8-story buildings that have consolidated services within them, parking, units that you don't have to mow your yard, which looking more and more attractive for me, especially as we're getting into a season that we're going to need to think about that. And that we didn't have that. We didn't have this that was looking at that market, and that it was really exciting to be bringing those people in. But on the flip side, in my world in history, a lot of our big mansions by those inventors, by those entrepreneurs of the 19th century that have been out on what we call Millionaires Row, and we've really struggled to find owners. The people buying them are Columbus people. Mm-hmm. And they're not coming here and then commuting back. They might for a year. But a lot of people, they're like, that drive gets long. We're close to Columbus. I love that you can make it to a Buckeyes game in 45 minutes. You can make it to a concert, even a little less than that. But driving it every single day back and forth, it's a long drive. There's only so many books on tape you can listen to. And what happens is those people then start converting. They start creating businesses here. They create their own law firm. They might start with a local law firm and then create their own law firm. So we're seeing more of that. So these houses, these big, grand, what used to be white elephants in our community are becoming these incubators. They're pulling people into the community. And I know a lot of the new housing, because we need all types of housing. Like what type of housing we need? You name it, we need it. And as we see those, we're attracting more and more residents, and that's the diversity of residents too, because it's created additional opportunities for other types of housing in the city. So I'm really high on housing right now. I know it was our biggest need. Mm-hmm. And David, as you said, this community plans. We look at those things. This community knew we needed housing. There's been concerted effort from Springfield, Greater Springfield moving forward, other work the partnership's been doing, other groups, these great organizations we have here in Springfield that have been thinking about it. They've addressed it. And we went from, what were the years? 2016, the Pew study came out that there was no city in America that was harder hit, that had lost more median household income than Springfield, Ohio, right? Massive amount of income that we had lost over about a 20-year span. And then it was like just 4 years later, we were one of the hottest real estate markets in America. And I remember the New York Times calling and being like, how is this possible? This is not possible. But it is possible when a community addresses these things. Part it helped that we had a lot of pent-up demand, but a part happened that this is a city that is the right size, that when there's a problem, it can work together, you can create collaborations and tackle a topic. And I think housing has been one of the greatest.
Well, exactly. And I'd add, Kevin, it's the right size, and it also happens to be in today's world in the right place. So it's in the middle of a very dynamic corridor of growth with leaning into the future economy, but also I think it's in the upper Midwest, and we've talked about the macro trends and how the potential for people to be continuing to look at locations like this because of the livability and the ability to be able to endure more extreme climatic events. So thank you, Horton, for filling in some pieces there. It's very exciting.
Yes, and I could keep talking to both of you all day long, but I know we need to move on. And just thank you, Horton, for joining us. It makes it really easy when you can ask one question and kind of run through a lot of the topics.
A podcast or a discussion?
A lot of the topics we wanted to get into, and we got into it in such a beautiful way. So thank you for your time, David. Thank you.
Thank you.
Join us for upcoming podcasts focused on our 7 strategic pillars. Again, today we were focused on our economic growth in our community and the work that we've been doing and the work that we need to continue doing. Upcoming podcasts will focus on more of those pillars, focused on that roadmap forward. Thank you.
You have been listening to Let's Make History Together podcast. You can visit letsmakehistorytogether.com for more episodes. You may also check out Springfield2051.com to learn how you can get involved in the process of shaping our community's future. Special thanks to our guests and to you, our listeners and fellow community members. The music excerpt used for this podcast is by Johnny Lytle, one of Springfield's legendary music stars.